Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are going to start the new series of lecture about new opening line, new Gambit line, and this is one of the most popular modern answers after White's first move D2, D4, and we are going to speak today and in our future lectures about the Benko or Volga Gambit. After D4, knight f6, C4, black, instead of playing usual classical lines like E6, which commonly leads to the Nimzo Indian defense or Queen's Indian defense, G6, which of course follows by bishop go to G7 and black is playing King's Indian or sharp Grunfeld line, Grunfeld defense after D7, D5, G6, let's say knight C3 and D5. Instead, black is going for the quite aggressive continuation. So instead, black is immediately challenges white's center by playing C7 and C5. So of course white could avoid any complication which happens after the strongest continuation, of course D4, D5, and to play something like E3 or knight F3. But the most principled line, of course, where white is going for a space advantage, is just moving pawn forward, D4, D5. And in that critical position, black also having wide number of options. So first of all, don't forget that black could play Benoni defense, modern Benoni defense as we call it today, after E6. Black could play also Benoni defense, we call it mostly old Benoni, because the structure becomes very, very close and quite similar to all kind of King's Indian defense when black's bishop is on G7. So this is only one small difference, and black's bishop commonly comes here to E7. And black could develop immediately its king side after playing G6, which almost by force transposing this line into the King's Indian defense. Indeed, after D4 and D5, black is having one more alternative, and this is a move which we are going to study today, and this is B7, B5 idea. Black immediately attacks white center pawn C4, trying to get rid and then to find the way somehow to remove white's old pawn on D5, white center pawn on D5, and to get the advantage in the center. So in Russian, this gambit is still called the Volga Gambit, while on the West it's named after the Hungarian American Grandmaster Paul Benko, who brought this opening into the top tournament practice, and he started to play this opening line on the highest ever level from the end of 50 and 60. I also played this opening line for many years, and even today I still use it. Why? Because in the Benko Gambit, black is not having any immediate idea how to destroy white's position. So here we have much more deep idea. So after c takes b5, I would like just to make some history facts. When this line for the first time was published, I mean in Russia, in Russian magazine in 1946 by one of the Russian masters from the town called Samara, which is situated on the river Volga. That's why all this line is called the Volga Gambit. So main idea for black here was immediately to attack the pawn on d5 and to get control over the center by playing e6. Now, in case of d takes e6 and f takes e6, black is getting very strong position in the center. So, developing following by d5, and bishop comes to d6 and short castling. Black is having already good diagonal for the bishop, open f file, and intending to build a very strong position in the center after e6 and e5. So pay attention. So black is just gaining strong center and great development of all pieces and prospect on the king side just only for 1 pawn. So which black is not going to win so easily, but always we can exchange this pawn by playing a6, and after b takes a6, black's knight could reach another center square on c6, and black is getting incredibly strong compensation for the sacrificed pawn. Indeed, white, of course, is not forced to capture on e6, and white also can play in this position knight c3. So, and even here, this line was quite deeply developed in the end of 40s, immediately after the Second World War. So this line becomes one of the most popular in the Russian tournaments. So, and here, let's say after e takes d5, knight takes d5, they can play bishop b7 with quite nice game for the sacrificed pawn. So this line is also quite interesting. If you like to try it, just you're welcome. Indeed, later on, when this position started to be analyzed very, I would say seriously, black realized that this pawn on b5 could be exchanged immediately after a6. So, after b takes a6, black is really sacrificing a pawn. So, what kind of compensation black has for the pawn? Let's look at the position after bishop takes a6 and take a look at the advantages which black has in such a situation. And also we could answer the question why the Benko Gambit becomes one of the most important opening and one of the weapons against white's d2 d4 move, and this opening Benko Gambit was included into the repertoire by almost all top grandmasters, included the former world champion Garry Kasparov, one of the, as we know, strongest in the whole chess history players. Also Kasparov, also Shirov, also Topalov. So we just Leko, we just can take a list of the best chess players on the last 25 years, and almost everybody used to play the Benko Gambit. So why this opening is so popular? First of all, black after bishop takes a6 already we can understand that black is getting the development advantage. So black is having already knight on f6 in the game and the bishop on a6. Second, white has to support this pawn on d5, and it's not so easy because we cannot play e4 instantly, since after bishop takes f1 white is losing the castling rights. So, and if white is going to lose the castling rights, so black is getting even more rapid development. So white has to spend more tempi for bringing its king somewhere to g2 or to h2, and only then to bring the rook to the center. I mean rook from h1. If white is going to develop a Fianchetti's bishop, let's say after g3 and bishop g2, also black's bishop on a6 will have no opponent in that situation. If white's playing e4, that same, the bishop on f6 becomes incredibly strong. Black, at the same time, black's main setup is just to fianchetting bishop to g7, so to play g6 and bishop comes to g7, take more control over the long diagonal. At the same time, black is taking more control over the e5 square, so also center into black's control. Also bishops are very actively posed towards the white's position. And don't forget that black, as a compensation, has also open files on the queen side. So white is having extra pawn on the queen side, but these pawns would become under extremely strong pressure of all black pieces. So I would like just to show you one very small example, short example, which happened in one of my games, which I played just maybe something like 25 years ago. So in this position, my opponent, not sure, maybe he faced this opening for the first time in his life. He decided just to play very simple move. He played e3. So white is somehow covering the pawn on b5. So if now black is capturing a takes b5, then white is still having an opportunity to capture bishop takes b5. So I just continue to develop my king side after g6. My opponent develops the knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3, d6. So black is building the pawn chain e7, d6 and c5, take more control over the e5 square, and somehow this bishop also could be developed maybe in some lines on f5, but usually the most natural place for this bishop, of course, of a6. And here, instead of playing usual move like bishop e2, my opponent decided immediately to capture the pawn, so he played b takes a6. So of course this move cannot be recommended because white is just spending more time and the black simply playing short castling. So of course I'm waiting for this bishop to be developed and only then capture with my bishop this pawn on a6. So my opponent played bishop e2, and now bishop takes a6 played. And white decided once again to play bishop takes a6. Knight takes e6. Short castling. Knight d7. Important move. Black is not allowing white to play b3 with the idea to fianchet the bishop to b2. At the same time, black is taking control over the e5 square. And after my opponent played e4, I immediately moved my queen to b6, attacking white's pawn on b2. So why is it important to play queen b6 in this position? Because white cannot develop the bishop from c1 anymore. So the pawn on b2 is hanging. White is trying to get rid of this pressure and free the bishop, trying to develop the bishop later on maybe to g5, and black once again preventing white from playing with the bishop on c1. So bishop is stuck on c1 in this situation. Already we can see the first problems which usually white is facing in the opening like Benko Gambit. White cannot simply develop all his pieces. So bishop can go because queen takes b2. White also cannot protect the pawn on b2, trying to play rook b1 with the idea to bring the bishop to f4. Why? Because after bishop takes c3, pawn on b2 is pinned, and the rook of course is hanging on b1. After b takes c3 and queen takes b1, the game is over. So already we see that white is having quite serious problem. My opponent played here h3. Black moved forward the knight to b4. Open also the a file, and white moved bishop finally to f4, trying to support e4 and e5. And I would like to pay attention that white, despite the fact that white is having here the extra pawn, and white's main strategy in this situation is trying to play e4, e5 and to start attacking in the center, maybe with additional threats on the king side, if black would allow it. From this point of view, it's quite interesting idea which was found by Soviet Union and then later on immigrated Grandmaster Lev Albert from United States. So in this position he found just great move which completely changed all the evaluation of the Benko Gambit. So black played, despite the fact that black is having in such a situation pawn down, black is going to exchange the strongest pieces on the board, queens. Black is playing queen a6. This is absolutely fantastic move, because from the strategic point of view, black has to exchange the queens for obtaining strong light square for the knight on d3. Black pieces are dominating the board. So look at the rook on b8, look at the rook on a8. White's position is under extremely strong pressure. So after rook f to e2, black immediately can play knight d3. But doesn't change anything even queen takes a6, rook takes a6. White is completely stuck. Rook a to b1, let's say, knight d3. And bishop, pawn, everything under attack. Look once again how great all black pieces all looking towards the white's queen side. e5 square is under control. Knight on d3 just obtained the great outpost. White cannot protect the pawn on b2 anymore, because once again the pawn on b2 is pinned. Black is simply playing bishop takes c3 and game is over. White is having rook on b1 unprotected. So after queen a6 already, white is having extremely difficult position. It's absolutely unclear what to do. Queen takes, rook takes. How to stop knight d3? Maybe white had to play something like this position, something like rook d1. But then black also can just answer knight c2, and once again b2 pawn is under attack. So my opponent decided to play something like g4. But of course knight comes to d3, attacking everywhere. Bishop c1, and already here I can just simply capture on b2, or I can capture on c1, but black is having so great positional domination that it's not necessary anymore. I'm just increasing my pressure over the white's queen side. So I just played c4, preparing the second knight to gain the great square on c5. So my opponent's pieces is just almost in the Zugzwang situation, all frozen. So my opponent plays something like king g2, but after knight c5 he just resigned in this position, because white cannot stop black's threat like knight b3 or knight takes b2 or bishop takes c3 and then Knight takes e4. White is completely dumped. It's no way to survive this position. So only one single game, but so many ideas. And so easy to study from only just one game what kind of problems white could meet in such a situation. So you can ask, okay, but what happens if white is playing I don't know, more tricky than just simply to play e3 and something like takes the pawn on a6. So maybe better somehow to play some different line against the Benko Gambit, not to accept the pawn sacrifice. So I just prepared for you a couple of very typical games from which we can understand immediately that you hardly even could escape from the classical position of Benko Gambit, and if you try in some tricky way to escape, you only find yourself in more trouble line. First of all, let's start all again. After d takes d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, b5, c takes b5, a6. White can play knight c3, but after a takes b5, knight takes b5 and bishop a6, we very fast could realize that best opportunity for white here is just to go back with the knight. Why? The attempt to support this knight after a4 doesn't work. Black is having open file a, and after bishop takes b5, white cannot recapture the bishop on b5. The rook on a1 is hanging. As well, white after bishop a6. So now pay attention that white's knight on b5 is under attack. White cannot play e3. This way, by the way, we are finished more than 10 games in the database I found. Why e3 is losing here? Because after bishop takes b5, white is finding himself just piece down. Bishop takes b5 could be met by queen a5 check, and the bishop is gone without any compensation. One more game. So after e3, after knight c3, a takes b5, knight takes b5, and bishop a6, one of the game continues this position, queen a4. Definitely mistake. So instead of continue developing white pieces, white is just playing with the queen, and as we know from our opening rules, from our opening principle, it's not the greatest idea from the strategic point of view to develop your queen too early. So after queen a4, white is in a trouble almost immediately. Let's see what happened. Bishop b7, double attack, queen on a4 and pawn on d5. Queen c2, queen a5 check. So black is not capturing immediately the knight, but gaining more time, bringing one more piece into the game. Knight c3 necessary, otherwise the knight is gone. Knight takes d5. Bishop d2. Knight b4. Black not only just won back the pawn, but also intending to bring d5 and d4, getting rid of white's knight from c3. So for white, extremely difficult to continue developing. Look at the bishop on b7, so powerful. All black pieces immediately coming into the game. So rook on a8 already in the game. After knight b4, queen b3. Somehow, white is trying maybe to counter-attack with a3, but look what happened. c4, another tactical resource. So white's queen cannot capture the pawn on c4. Easy to understand why. After queen takes c4, black is just simply playing knight c2 check, and the rook on a1 is gone. So all the time black is using tactical resources of the position, gaining more and more initiative. So white finally has to back with the queen to d1. So white's queen just traveled a lot, finally back home, and black just simply avoiding any tricks with the pin of the knight on b4 and played queen e5. So suddenly white decided to attack the knight finally, but this came to the very classical smooth red mate. Knight d3 with the checkmate. So this very short game already shows us that extremely dangerous in the opening, especially in the Gambit opening, to play with the same piece all the time. So white just continue moving its strongest piece all the time. Black also gaining back the material and also continue pressing white's position. And finally, white blundered made, but the position already was quite unpleasant for white. So immediately after the opening, black is having already clear upper hand. So today we just started to look at the ideas and the plans for black in the Benko Gambit. I would like you to include this great opening into your, as a part of your opening repertoire. So follow my next lecture, and if you have any question, you just could contact me and my website www.chesslessons.wordpress.com. So any questions about any opening lines about Benko Gambit. See you next time. Bye.